Welcome back to Squawk Box this morning. We're live at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland on day 3, our final day here. And earlier this morning, I caught up with Robert Smith. He's the chairman and CEO of Vista Equity Partners. And I asked him how he sees the future of capitalism. Here's what he had to say.
We're seeing, for the first since 1930, the biggest disparity in both wealth and income, and we have to do something about that. In the ESG initiative concept of it, the world of enterprise software, we're actually pretty good on the E side, right? We generate, we use a lot of power, and we also, have carbon footprints associated with travel. But for the most part, we're pretty clean. But it's the S part. Okay, the impact of, call it, social. How do we actually make a more inclusive environment? We have had to do it by necessity because we need talented people. And if you stuck to the traditional pools of people, you couldn't actually fill the roles and the jobs. I've got 75,000 plus employees. I have 5,000 open recs. If I just go to the same places everyone else has gone, I can't fill those recs.
I'm especially curious about how you think the African-American community thinks about the idea of capitalism.
Sure, that's a long conversation. If you think about it, capital, this whole idea of capital versus labor. Capitalism still is the most efficient system on the planet for uplifting humanity generally. But of course, in general we go up, but we have individual pockets that don't necessarily participate. African Americans have traditionally not participated. In fact, you go look at the Homestead Act, the Southern Homestead Act, redlining around communities, inability to actually gain a foothold in the capital part of capitalism. And so they've always been part of the labor part. Right? And that's the dynamic. So part of what we have to do and what we do is how do you move them into capital? There's been announcements about how do you drive capital into these communities, some of which are policy driven, okay? Some of which are actually individual and some are philanthropic. So I think we now have the first time in the history of this planet where you can actually generate capital not owning capital, i.e. intellectual property, using technology, okay, in one generation. But you have to get on-ramped into this technology revolution. You got to get on-ramped. Internships, experiences that actually get you into these software companies, these technology companies.
President Trump's often talked about what he says is record unemployment for African Americans in the United States under his administration. Do you think the African American community appreciates that point?
I think, if you didn't have a job and you have one now, you do appreciate it. When did it start? Is it now, et cetera? But, we've got record unemployment. That, from what I can tell, that is true. Now, the real question is it just leading to income or is it actually leading to wealth? Part of when I think about it is how do you convert that income to wealth? Well, typically in America, it's been through land ownership. What does that mean? Buying a house, having the ability for that house to actually appreciate the neighborhoods and being able to borrow and use the capital to send your kids to school so they have the next opportunity to increase the capital base in your family. So, like all things, it's a great start to get income, but we now have to convert that income to capital into these communities.
Tell me about the Morehouse donation. Tell me how you thought to do that. How did it come about?
When you see a child liberated, and music can liberate you, education can liberate you, and in some cases the liberation of a burden of debt because you took the initiative to go to a college, to get educated, take on debt, and then your family, your mother, your grandparents took on debt so that you could be the first one in your family to graduate from college, to go get a job, and now you have a burden of debt that may prevent you from actually buying a house for another 20, 25 years. So when I thought about my capacity as a human being, as an African American male business person, what's a good way to liberate a spirit? What's a good way to liberate 400 spirits 400 years after 1619? And so when I thought about it, I said, this is a good way to do it.
Robert Smith, I love that story. It's one of those great sort of inspirational stories in terms of what he was able to do for students. And then we had a longer conversation, hopefully you can see it online, about politically whether we should effectively wipe out student debt across the board. And
what do you think?
He's not totally for that. He thinks it's much more complicated.
Well,
so
it is.
It 100% is. But it was very interesting to hear from him. And it's just his own personal story is just such a great one.